Hey there, I'm Jackie Ferris. This week on the 302, we are celebrating Christmas with historic Lewes. So grab a rucksack, we're loading up on the goodies. Merry Christmas from the General Store at the historic Lewes campus in Lewes, Delaware. I'm joined by Marcos Salavarria. He's going to tell us a little bit about what Christmas was like back in the day. Marcos, thank you so much for joining us.
Well, thank you for having me here in the Thompsonville General Store. This is a store that operated from a period of 1800 all the way till 1968. Believe it or not. And the best amalgamation this time of year, as young children looking forward to the visit of Santa Claus, comes from a child who once told me this is the Walmart of the past, so to speak. But indeed, the country store is where you can get all of your products. Looking ahead to Christmas time, right in the case here, we have, of course, the penny candy, the very memorable pieces that adults and children alike might remember from their past. Candy has been a part of Christmas for decades. Before modern times, the candy would have been what you see here, the oranges, the apples, the fruits, small gifts given to children for good behavior.
So let's talk a little bit about this candy. They're in different kinds of decanters. And when we see decanters now, they're typically made by a machine, but that wasn't the case back then.
Correct. So difficult to tell, but many collectors of the glass penny candy forms, and you see we have all types, a little dog, a rabbit, a hen, and cars, trains, planes, and automobiles, my goodness. And indeed an old hook and rail phone. I like to joke it's the iPhone 0.5. But a good collector can notice that sometimes along the back of the animal or form or whatever it may be is a small line. It's known as pressed glass. It's two pieces that was in the Industrial Revolution pressed together. Before that time, if that line is missing, it tells you it's an older piece. It's a rarer piece, and thus more highly collectible.
So what does the candy taste like?
Chalk, honestly. Honestly, I give the best amalgamation to the candy we have to students today that I tell them it tastes a little bit like Pez. Like, what? I tell them it tastes a little bit more like Necco wafers. They're, what? Now, remember as well, too, as we'll talk more today, I know about chocolate and sugar. Sugar is a highly sought-after commodity. It's expensive. And be glad, I suppose, young children, for the sugar they receive on Christmas Day today, for it's a great deal more than their ancestors would have had.
Sure, and when we think about chocolate and sugar today, it's a lot different. We're a little spoiled, because back then it was a treat. So tell us a little bit about the form that you have at, at your elbow.
So it's St. Nicholas, but of course, Santa Claus. This is a older mold for cookies, one of those ways to get your sugar, for candy mold for gingerbread, indeed. So a lovely and heritage treat.
Definitely. And you have a gorgeous little Christmas tree set up, and the history of the Christmas tree is an interesting one.
Yes, indeed. So the Christmas tree would have been known by only a few in early colonial period. Many of those German immigrants that came, that fought in the American Revolution and settled beyond. We know, of course, today the song of Old Tannenbaum, Old Christmas Tree. But the popularization of the Christmas tree really did not begin until the mid to late Victorian period with Queen Victoria and Prince Albert when they put their first Christmas tree within their palace home. The fad was caught on very quickly within the United States. And as we see with this Christmas tree today, between the 1950s and 1970s, jumping ahead of the modern era, the glass ornaments, the baubles, as we begin to know, the popcorn, a traditional stringing of popcorn written about by Jane Austen centuries ago. So the Christmas tree itself is as unique to the family, to the traditions, to those who put it up.
So where did the tradition of stringing popcorn and putting it on our Christmas tree come from? You mentioned Jane Austen, but what specifically? I mean, were people eating it, or was it just for decor?
Yes, it was decor at first, and then there is a time again, Christmas time in the past, the colonial period, Regency, Victorian, was more of not just one day. It's not for us today, rush, 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 shop, 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 all gifts in one time. No, when travel was more difficult, you would stay with family for quite a long period. And a lot of the tradition as well, games are played, the parlor games that we may know today, charades, is a version of Pictionary. So while you are staying and celebrating with family over a couple days, maybe a couple weeks, you do have a chance to nosh, you have a chance to eat the popcorn, you're making tea, you're making chocolate, you're making coffee, you're entertaining. It's one of the busiest seasons for weddings as well for centuries, that because it's one of the few times you have everyone together, and why not celebrate joyously with new unions?
So I know a little bit later came hanging candy canes on the tree. Do you know anything about that?
As much as they're, again, I don't know the year, do forgive me, but again, another edible treat in an era before the plastic and the glass production of ornaments. So decorating your tree with things that you can take away, small gifts, small edibles, again, popularized still to this day.
Even in music, I know there's a line in a song, a peppermint stick for old Saint Nick.
Oh, yes. Yes, indeed. And again, Saint Nick is varied from place to place. His legend, his ideas, but the idea, again, of giving gifts goes back many, many, many years. This is a time, again, when you want to as well, sadly enough, sickness for many years. And of course, child mortality rates into the 1890s, even later at times. You are celebrating that a child is a child for a much shorter time. The colonial period, by about age 12 or 13, you're considered an adult. If you can push a plow and a horse, you are working. But to find a way to have something for children, it does not come out till much, much later. Christmas time really was, again, celebrating everyone together, the new harvest coming from the previous fall, entering into the new year, and again, awaiting spring.
Now, one of the best things about this show is we're going to talk about chocolate. I'm really excited to do that, and we'll do that when we come right back.
I'm Michael Evans from Battle Axe, and I'd like you to ask me about the 302.
Welcome back. We're at historic Lewes, and we are in a schoolhouse. And what better place to learn about chocolate than this place? And we're joined again by Marcos. Now let's talk a little bit about chocolate was a lot different back in the Revolutionary War era.
If you ever wonder where chocolate comes from, it only grows about 20 degrees north and south of the equator. So around the time of the Revolution, it could have come from Jamaica, Central and South America, West Africa. Today, most chocolate, almost all chocolate comes from West Africa, but it all comes from this amazing little package here. This is a dried cacao pod. Now you have to imagine the cacao trees grow to about 6 to 10 feet in height, about 6 to 10 of these pods, harvested the same way for centuries. A quick chop of the machete. Inside there's a pulp almost like that of a peach, and inside of that pulp, known as yucca, you actually have the chocolate beans. So these are actual cacao beans. They're very similar to peanuts in the fact they have an outer shell, an inner edible heart, but they're also very similar to coffee. So the beans would be shipped across the Atlantic here to the American colonies, and we know from 1767 till 1775, throughout the Delaware River Bay and Valley, 230,000 pounds of chocolate. Lewes, 1,300. So we made a good bite into that chocolate.
It's very fragrant.
It is, indeed, it is. And again, similar to, really do think of coffee as you roast it over a fire. Imagine you're releasing the smells, you're releasing the freshness, and a good cook could recognize the smell that it's done. Now, you're melting it down into a little bit of a liquid, and what you're searching for, and you're welcome to smell if you wish, this is 100% cacao. This is known as the nibs, the chocolate nibs, the heart of chocolate, 100%. A lot of people look for 60, 70, 80% cacao, remembering it's very bitter. Now, our forefathers and foremothers would have foregone having sugar. This is a 10-ounce and a 12-ounce sugar cone. A typical family of 4 would have about 10 ounces of sugar a month. This is your 6-month supply right here. So sugar, hard to come by, very expensive. Instead, what you will utilize are common spices: nutmeg, cinnamon, vanilla, orange peel, star anise or anise, and lastly, cayenne pepper. These are all substituting the lack of sugar. You would take your nibs into a mortar and a pestle, have a heat source beneath it, maybe a little bit of orange, maybe shave a bit of cinnamon. As you shave it in, you begin to mix, grind into a paste. A typical pound of sugar would take 8 hours to make. I'm talking to you today for about 8 minutes. But this is, believe it or not, Jackie, this is the chocolate cake of the past.
Wow.
Not too appetizing. It is solidified and sold in this manner. For one last step, you take your hardened chocolate, you will then finally shave it into a chocolate pot. These are actual replica chocolate pots. They're different than a teapot. And your last step is to use what's known as the swizzle stick or the mollicado, and you're going to froth. You're going to froth your chocolate just as frothy as you can. There were competitions, in fact, not yet in Delaware, but some found in Pennsylvania, where the ladies would be mixing the chocolate, and the frothiest lady would win. And it comes to the fact that a father might say to their son, "Remember, my lad, as you marry, find yourself a frothy lass." Now, we thankfully today have Dr. Franklin's electronic automatic mixing machine, which is mixing our chocolate up at a much faster pace, a great deal more hot, and indeed, a chance for you to sample. Now, as this chocolate, a liquid chocolate, again, a drinkable chocolate, that would have been had by our founding fathers and mothers, a family displayed here. Remember, to show a polite society, you always keep your finger up, because if you drink as such and keep your finger down, blocks your face, quite rude. So a genteel person drinks with the pinky up. And sip this, do not gulp it, let it coat your tongue, and search for the flavors of cinnamon, nutmeg, vanilla, orange peel. If you feel a tickle at the back of your throat, that's the cayenne pepper.
That's delicious.
Indeed, indeed. So this was a hearty drink had in the morning, really oftentimes given to children alongside coffee and tea. It contains ingredient known as theobroma, which is an alternative to caffeine. And one of our wonderful toasts, for I must toast you, is that today we know chocolate of above 60% cacao contains amino acid flavonoids, which are said to help with memory. So a toast of the past said, let us drink chocolate to remember and wine to forget.
Cheers.
Huzzah.
Now, this was a delicacy back in the day, is that right?
Very much so. Not until about the time of the American Revolution, did chocolate become more affordable. And indeed, this was had by all levels of society. George Washington, one of our names I must say, indeed enjoyed this chocolate mixed with brandy.
Now, you do demonstrations like this for anyone that comes.
Correct.
This time of year, right?
Yes, this time of year. And we do this most often in the wintertide because of the fact of the spices that we mentioned. The spice trade and vessels that are coming across to the American colonies are oftentimes arriving in late December. But yes, indeed, I will be presenting to a hearty group of Girl Scouts tomorrow, a intrepid band of Boy Scouts on Tuesday, and a church group on Friday.
Excellent. Now, we talked a little bit about chocolate for children, but when we come back, we'll be talking about libations for adults. We'll be right back.
Hi, I'm Janice Savini, Director of Fearless Improv, and we are making it up as we go on the 302.
Welcome back. We are now in Mariner's Tavern with Marcos, and we're going to talk a little bit about a beverage that was a favorite during the holidays.
Known as grog, it was a favorite of sailors all through the year, but especially at a time to celebrate around the Christmastide season. So for a long period, rum was the drink of the British Royal Navy, as well that of the emerging Continental Navy and later American Navy. So grog was you had a daily ration of oftentimes what's known as your gill or your gill cup of rum. On land, that rum is cut just a little bit with a bit of water and lime juice, because we know, of course, today, as they did not, but for some reason, lime keeps away the scurvy, the vitamin C they weren't aware of. So indeed, this is, believe it or not, a healthy drink, yes. So our own specialty recipe of rum, I shall pour you in good measure, as they would say. And indeed, just a bit on one of our historic mugs. The rum comes first. The lime is put on top to cut that. And a very simple swirl and a tip of the wrist. But before you do, I'll pour myself a fair measure.
So when we came in, we saw a sign that said mugs, $25,
Yes.
cash only. So when you come visit and you try one of these drinks, you can go home with your very own
historic mug. The image is actually that of a sail vessel of 1813 on mine, of 1776 of yours. We have a great deal of history here, but you can never drink without a toast, and it's a long one, but a good one, I promise, and one of the holidays that says to the 4 cardinal sins of man, of cheating, fighting, stealing, and drinking, if you cheat, cheat death. If you steal, steal the heart of one you love. If you fight, fight for your country. And if you drink, may you always drink amongst friends.
Cheers.
Cheers.
I'm not going to say
Strong.
that's the best I have ever had, but it is, you can definitely taste the...
Shall put the hair on your chest, no?
That's just what I need. So where would you get the rum?
Excellent question. The rum is part of the triangle trade. The molasses put into darker and rums. We do a spiced rum because, again, just as the chocolate had the spices to cut the flavor, the spices in this rum are adding to it, coming, again, from the Caribbean quite frequently.
It's kind of like with the lime, it kind of echoes like a Moscow Mule of sorts.
I've heard people say as such, and indeed the first cocktail, again, if you may call it that, with the whiskey, the old-fashioned, of course, in the day, it was not the old-fashioned, it was just the first cocktail. So the drinks are had. I love the names that we have as well: Flip, Syllabub, cherry cordials, so many different drinks. Remembering that water really was a lot of times unhealthy to drink, especially here in Lewes, near the sea and the brackish Lewes Creek. They said, "Let he who drinks water be drowned in it." Now, of course, they did drink water, but the water came in your brewed beer, in your fermented cider, in your other drinks of the day. Why, even children were given beer in a tavern such as this, known as small beer. A 2% alcohol volume, no hops or barley as of yet. But the tavern was the social meeting place, so as we think of Christmas time again, of gathering, this tavern just days ago was filled with music and merriment. And think of the carols that we still sing today, those that are more past the 1950s, but we have the King Wenceslas, of course. We have Green Sleeves. There is Hark the Herald Angels Sing. This tavern would have been filled with song, although I can't guarantee the pitch and tone of it after a few too many grogs.
Sure, but the alcohol back then wasn't as strong as the alcohol that we are used to now.
The beer certainly not was, but probably the hard liquor was probably harder, actually,
Really?
than we drink today. We have a more refined process today through machinery than they would have had. And indeed, we have records that by the end of the 18th century, individuals, the average person is probably drinking about 2 gallons of alcohol a year.
Wow.
Put that to an equivalency of the United States. And now, time passed, of the 1980s, it was known that next time that quantity was being drank was in soda, was in beverages.
That's amazing. Now, since it's Christmas, a lot of folks have already purchased their gifts. But next year, if somebody's interested in a mug, because this would be this is a great coffee mug.
Absolutely.
So where can they go to find out about the mugs and to find out about your programming for the rest of for 2022?
Excellent. To our website of historiclewes.org and our programs section. And we're looking forward indeed to our next Tavern Talks. We hope to occur right here in May of 2022, where we say we get a bit of hop-fueled history, live the revolution, live the history, drink in the past.
Excellent. Well, Merry Christmas, Marcos.
Merry Christmas and happy holidays, madam.
We'll be right back. For more information on Historic Lewes, visit historiclewes.org. That'll do it for this week's episode of The 302. We're going to leave you with some beautiful downtown shots decorated for Christmas. Until next time, I'm Jackie Ferris. Tell them you saw it on The 302 and have a fantastic Christmas.